Half the world's oceans were once owned by two countries because of a line, not a coastline, not a fleet. A line drawn on paper by men who had never seen most of the planet they were dividing. That line still echoes in modern borders, languages, and maritime claims. So how did a secretive 16th century deal, blessed by a distant pope, quietly script our world map? And why do lawyers and politicians still argue in its shadow? To answer that, we have to go back, before Google Maps, before satellites, to one ambitious voyager. October 1492. Christopher Columbus, sailing for Spain, reaches Caribbean islands he believes are near Asia. He has no idea he's walked into a geopolitical minefield, because Portugal, Spain's maritime rival, already has a papal blessing to dominate routes along Africa. So here's the problem. When new lands appear, who gets them? The first to plant a flag? The first to ask the Pope? Or the one with the bigger navy? The answer became a treaty so arrogant it claimed authority over oceans no European had even crossed. Enter Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, political operator, not oceanographer. In 1493, fresh from news of Columbus's voyage, he issues bulls granting Spain rights over newly discovered lands west of a vague line in the Atlantic. Portugal is furious. They've spent decades edging down Africa's coast, building trade, planting forts. Now, a Spanish-leaning pope seems to hand the future to their rivals. But that wasn't the only problem. The bulls are ambiguous, cartography is crude, and nobody agrees exactly where this invisible frontier lies. So the two crowns decide. They'll fix the world with a pen. June 1494. In the quiet Castilian town of Tordesillas, Spanish and Portuguese negotiators gather. No cameras, no global summit, just candles, ink, and a wildly incomplete picture of the planet. Their task, redraw the invisible papal line to satisfy both kings. They agree on a meridian 370 leagues west of the Cape Verde Islands. Everything west, Spain's to explore and claim. Everything east, Portugal's domain. On parchment, it looks simple. On a round earth with bad maps. It's a legal time bomb. Because here's the twist. They're not just dividing land. They're dividing seas. The Treaty of Tordesillas, signed June 7, 1494, never mentions the word ocean. But its logic assumes that seas, like continents, can be granted as exclusive hunting grounds. In practice, it's a division of water as much as land. The Atlantic is sliced into two spheres of influence, and by extension, so is everything beyond it. But then comes the awkward question. If you draw a line on one side of the world, where does it reappear on the other? That problem would haunt explorers and quietly hand Portugal an enormous hidden advantage. While Spain pushes west, Portugal doubles down on the east. In 1498, Vasco da Gama rounds the Cape of Good Hope and reaches India, securing a sea route that bypasses Muslim and Venetian middlemen. Portugal treats the Indian Ocean not as open water, but as a controlled highway. Forts at Goa, Malacca, and Hormuz, fleets enforcing a Cartaz system, mandatory passes for merchants. Their logic is pure Tordesillas. This half of the world's trade routes are ours. But something unexpected is about to happen on the Spanish side of the line, in Brazil. In April 1500, Pedro Alvares Cabral, sailing under the Portuguese flag, drifts far west across the Atlantic and sights land, Brazil. Officially, this is a discovery. Geographically, it's a jackpot, because on many contemporary maps, part of Brazil lies east of that Tordesillas meridian, which means it's Portugal's, not Spain's. Whether by accident or informed speculation, Portugal now owns a vast foothold in the Americas. The treaty's abstract line turns into a solid coastline, shaping language, culture, and borders. But the real trouble surfaces when Europeans reach the world's largest ocean. In 1519, Ferdinand Magellan, sailing for Spain, attempts the first circumnavigation. He wants to reach Asia by going west, Spain's half of the globe, thanks to Tordesillas. After a brutal passage through the strait that now bears his name, his fleet enters a vast, surprisingly calm ocean he calls the Mar Pacifico, the Pacific. But here's the headache. Where exactly does Spain's side end and Portugal's begin on this new sea? The treaty never defined a corresponding line on the far side of the world. That ambiguity would launch another round of behind-closed-doors cartographic warfare. Spanish cosmographers scramble. If Tordesillas gives them the west, do the fabled Spice Islands, Maluku, in today's Indonesia, fall on their side or Portugal's? The answer depends on calculations nobody can agree on. The Earth's exact circumference, the true position of longitudes, even the shape of continents. Competing maps show the same islands drifting from Spanish to Portuguese control. This isn't just academic. Nutmeg and cloves from those islands are literally worth their weight in gold. So the two empires do what they do best. They negotiate another secretive treaty to settle who owns what they barely understand. In 1529, at Zaragoza, Spain and Portugal hammer out a kind of anti-Tordesillas, a second line, this time in the Eastern Hemisphere. For a hefty payment, Spain effectively concedes the Spice Islands to Portugal. Now, between Tordesillas and Zaragoza, the planet is boxed in by two meridians, carving Earth into Portuguese and Spanish hemispheres. They've put price tags on oceans, turning whole basins into near monopolies. But here's the irony. Just as Iberian powers claim the world, other European states are sharpening a different weapon, an idea that will eventually shatter these paper empires. The Dutch and English have no interest in honouring a treaty they never signed. In the early 1600s, their ships attacked Portuguese convoys and muscle into Asian trade. To justify this, Dutch jurist Hugo Grotius writes Mare Liberum in 1609, the free sea. His argument? No nation can own the ocean. It's too vast, too fluid. Iberian ownership, rooted in papal bulls and Tordesillas, is legally absurd. Yet, Portugal and Spain had already reshaped realities, ports, colonies, language zones, based on that fiction. And that fiction would outlive their naval dominance. Spain and Portugal eventually decline, but their lines don't disappear. They fossilize into borders. Brazil's bulging Atlantic coastline, directly tied to Tordesillas-era claims. The Lusophone world, Brazil, Angola, Mozambique, East Timor, traces back to those early Portuguese rights over routes and coasts. Spanish predominance across most of the Americas reflects its western share of the globe. Even when later treaties redraw boundaries, they do so on a canvas laid down in the 16th century. But the most surprising survival of Tordesillas isn't on land. It's written into how we think about the seas today. Modern international law, especially the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, loudly rejects the idea that any country owns the high seas. Beyond territorial waters, oceans are a global commons. But watch what happens along coastlines. States now claim exclusive economic zones, up to 200 nautical miles from shore, granting special rights over fishing, seabed minerals, and energy. Sound familiar? It's Tordesillas without the Pope, invisible lines projecting outward, carving the ocean into national slices. And when zones overlap, negotiations and disputes eerily echo those 16th century arguments over phantom meridians. From the South China Sea to the Arctic, states draw lines over fish, oil, gas, and shipping routes. Officially, nobody cites the Treaty of Tordesillas. Unofficially, the mindset is strikingly similar. If you can persuade others your line is legitimate, you control what lies beyond it. Brazil, heir to that Portuguese Atlantic legacy, is especially assertive about its offshore resources. Colonial maps aren't used in court, but they inform national narratives, stories of historical entitlement. In theory, the oceans are shared. In practice, we are still living inside a 16th century mental map, a pope's pen stroke, a secret meeting in a Castilian town, a treaty written by men who believed the world could be neatly halved. They were wrong about geography, wrong about sovereignty, and blind to the peoples already living by those seas. Yet their arrogance hardened into habits. That powerful states can draw lines on a map and expect the planet to obey. Today, we speak of free seas and shared resources, but fight over maritime borders like 16th century kings. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the unknown, subscribe for more uninteresting history.